Okay, good morning, everyone. So as you've probably gathered from my bio, I am more coming at wireless and broadband from the commercial side than from the technical side. So what I want to do here today is to give an introduction to what is WAPA, for those of you who may not know, and then also set just a little bit of context setting for the rest of the 2 days around why is this, as I say, why is the spectrum stuff important? Because it can be obviously quite technical. And one of the things that I try to do in my role as chairperson of WAPA and kind of having the communication around it is to try and contextualize why is this actually important. So what does spectrum and technology actually have to do with delivering service? And then what are some of the key questions that we as industry need to be asking as we interact with policymakers and government? So just so I can kind of gauge, because this is, I'm obviously the first speaker, how many people in this room are coming, are policymakers or working for government in some form? A couple, okay. And how many here are from private industry? Okay, what on earth are the rest of you? Just out of curiosity. Alice, what's the... You're from governments? Yep. Okay. And how many are from... Sorry? Yes. Policymakers, regulators. Red tape people. Okay. And then how many are from South Africa? Okay. And just out of curiosity, the rest of you, what other countries are you from? Malawi, Zimbabwe. Sorry? Guinea? And Puerto Rico? Okay. Angola. And then we have Nigeria here. And? Lesotho? Yeah. Fantastic. So we have quite a broad range. So the reason I did that is that some of the information here is very specific to South Africa. And as I was actually putting together my slides, I often will talk about the South African policy framework, but in this case I've actually tried to keep it a bit more general. So some of the things around South Africa Connect and our specific policy objectives, we don't have specific slides on, but we can certainly talk about that. So I won't feel badly then with a couple intro slides to what is WAPA, if I can get the slides to move. I'm not sure. Can I get some technical assistance, please? Which button? I should have to do this. I apologize for this. Anyway, as we're waiting to advance the slides, I can talk about WAPA without slides. So WAPA is the Wireless Access Providers Association of South Africa. So the slides just in a few moments will give an overview. Essentially, WAPA it's a trade association for the wireless industry. So it was founded in 2006. Mostly at that point, it was wireless ISPs. So since then, it's expanded. We now have over 220 members that run the gamut from large operators such as Neotel and Internet Solutions, all the way down to, again, the rural WISPs, and a number of distributors, equipment manufacturers, people in the services industry, consultants. So really anything, anything and everything wireless is the mandate for WAPA. So what we work on is, some of what we do is policy work, spectrum work. So my colleague, Jens Langenhurst, he's the deputy chair and also spectrum expert. So he's going to be speaking tomorrow at 12:30 around specifically some of WAPA's, some of our positions or some of our questions on the spectrum side. So part of what we do is policy work. With spectrum, yes, but also just generally, what is the feedback from the wireless industry as a whole, and specifically trying to represent the smaller operators, because the larger operators do have regulatory provisions where they're capable in terms of resources and capability to be able to comment to ICASA and to in South Africa, the Department of Telecommunications and Postal Services, the DTPS, around what their opinions as to either some of the regulatory frameworks or some of the policy frameworks. So we try to act on behalf of some of the smaller operators and just the industry as a whole. So, and then also for our members, we promote obviously technical best practices and business best practices, and also a platform of communication between different members, so they can share ideas, they can share reviews of technology, and also for business development, so that some of the larger members can understand how to make profit in some of the smaller members, and vice versa. And I think actually this latter bit around trying to break down some of the information asymmetries and get people to talk and communicate is actually probably the most important aspect of what we're trying to do with WAPA. So, have we been able to advance the slides here? I don't remember what I was going to talk about next. I'm going to give an introduction to WAPA.
Yeah.
Yeah, test my memory of what I was going to talk about. I guess while we're waiting, do any of the representatives from any of the other countries, is there any equivalent wireless focused association in your countries? Anyone wants to bring that up? I think one of we've within the last year within WAPA, some of the conversations we've been having is what is the future of this nonprofit organization, which is a logical thought process for any nonprofit to be going through, because when it was originally founded, as I mentioned, it was we're going now. Cool. It was mostly for, there we go. Fantastic. It's mostly for wireless ISPs, and then as we're going forward. Wireless is some of the things that I'm going to be talking about in some of the other presentations you guys are going to be hearing. We're having now a whole 2-day conference around spectrum and digital migration and new technologies, and it's actually quite fascinating. Some of the new vendors that are, some of the existing vendors, some of the new vendors that are coming out all the time with fascinating high-speed, long-distance, non-line-of-sight technology. And one of the challenges for industry is to understand first of all, how do you actually separate the vendor claims from the reality? Secondly, how do you actually put this into practice in a business case that makes sense? How do we learn from each other in doing that? And then, obviously, you can only do that within the policy and regulatory, specifically the regulatory framework that you're sitting in. So, what actually should be the voice of industry when it comes to this? So, one of the things that WAPA is, I think, morphing into is actually just, again, trying to understand what are the implications of all these new wireless technologies. Because it's more complicated now than it was a couple of years ago, and it's getting more and more complicated all the time, especially when we start to talk about things like dynamic spectrum allocation. So why are we here? South Africa and Africa needs fundamentally better broadband. So this stat at the bottom here is that South Africa, I'm not actually sure the other countries represented here fall on this list, but in the recent State of the Internet report, South Africa was ranked 97th in the world in terms of average broadband speeds. That's about halfway down the list, I believe. And so, obviously, broadband internet, access to internet is very important for economic development, which there's a variety of stats that I didn't include, which essentially show that for every increase in internet penetration, your GDP goes up by some percentage. The point of the matter is I'm preaching to the choir, I would imagine. So we all know that broadband is important. The real question, and specifically the question in the African context, is how do we actually do it in an affordable manner? Because people don't have necessarily the incomes to be able to support some of the ARPUs that what you might call the older or the traditional telco business models require in order to be able to expand coverage into some of these into rural areas or remote areas or just low income areas. So that's why we're here. So I've already covered quite a bit of this about WAPA. I'm going to skip over it now. This again is basically a summary of who's the members of WAPA. So we have the WISPs, the wireless ISPs. This probably represents just about at least over half our membership base. So the average WAPA member is relatively small as an SME, often in rural, underserved areas, but also sometimes in urban areas. So wireless specialists, this is probably the second biggest category of our membership, because it has these are service providers, systems integrators, consultants, distributors that work in the wireless field, vendors as well, and then large players. So this is WAPA. It represents everything for the wireless industry. These are just some stats. This is the number of subscribers. One of the interesting things, if you look at some of these numbers, and again, for those of you that are not from South Africa, just a little bit of context, if you actually add together all the WAPA members, it kind of fits, obviously they don't act as an aggregator, but if you add together the subscriber numbers, you actually wind up with an operator which rivals any of the major large operators. And if you look at this slide, this is another great example, WAPA is represented in every single municipality, every single district and municipality. So there's at least one WAPA member countrywide, which is actually amazing when you think about it. And this shows obviously the density, so it makes sense clearly. In the areas where there's more density population, higher incomes, you're going to have a larger number of people that are competing or that are offering services in that space. But we do have nationwide representation, which is a fantastic thing to be able to say. So, now's where the fun begins. So, wireless is everywhere. What I put on this slide is these are pretty much all the different kinds of wireless technologies or communications technologies that are commonly found. So we have here, I put on the same image, your high sites, which can be used either for point-to-points, for essentially for backhaul, or for point-to-multipoints, which can either be, as our friends the mobile carriers, that's how they deliver the service that we are all so used to. But also now using that same technology with LTE and LTE Advanced to deliver residential services. This is, I guess it's somewhat recent, probably the last 6 months or so. It's been heating up quite a bit now. Some of the mobile carriers or the telecoms providers in South Africa that have access to LTE and have been building LTE networks, they're now busy competing to offer high-speed residential services. So it's quite interesting actually to watch how LTE and fiber to the home are kind of playing it out in the marketplace. It's fascinating. And I'll cover this in a bit, but one of the advantages, obviously, of wireless technologies is that it can be, again, comparatively, it depends of course on what you measure, but wireless technologies can be very fast and cost-effective to roll out, compared to something where fiber, you actually have to dig a trench and lay the fiber. So they're very complementary technologies, and even the rapid deployment guidelines for fiber actually now include wireless backhaul as a fast way to be able to get a decent high-speed connection while the trench is laid and we wait for permission for the civils. So that's what we see on the high sites, and then we have also below that satellite. And satellite is quite interesting because there's some challenges with satellite when it comes to cost and when it comes to latency for obvious reasons, because all the communication is starting on the ground, going up to the sky, going back to the ground. So it's obvious why the latency with satellite technologies isn't optimal. However, it's much faster and easier to get a satellite connection to an extremely remote area than to try and imagine digging a fiber trench, or imagine having a line of wireless point to points to try and get connectivity out. So it's definitely an interesting technology. And then of course we have Wi-Fi, which is where, in my commercial side, this is where I specialize. And Wi-Fi is an interesting sort of complementary technology because there's a period of time a couple of years ago when people would actually position it as a fight between mobile carriers and Wi-Fi, which is actually quite silly because the technologies are just as complementary as wireless and fiber. So Wi-Fi has fantastic throughput and it has wonderful ubiquity of device support. So if you look at the laptops in this room, for example, they don't have SIM cards and they're not getting their internet connection through licensed spectrum, but they all have Wi-Fi on them. So it's great in terms of, and also particularly for Africa, for cost-effective type of devices. So we're seeing now mobile carriers are trying to roll out smartphones at more affordable price points, and those smartphones will also have Wi-Fi on them. So to the degree that there's some form of free internet that can be provided from a variety of places. It can be private industry, it can be nonprofits, it can be governments. A lot of those connections will go over Wi-Fi. But on the other hand, Wi-Fi can never properly compete with something like LTE or a licensed spectrum, which is long distance, because of the fact that its range is terrible. So if you have a 100-meter range on a Wi-Fi router, you're doing pretty well. So if you're going to put these in the shopping center, you might need 12, you might need 35, you might need 150, depending on the size of the shopping center. So it's definitely, it plays a role as part of a network. And I think the main point that I want to make, in this slide up here is that there's lots of different kinds of wireless. When you talk about wireless, what does it actually mean? How is it used? And the different sorts of wireless technologies are actually quite complementary to each other. So it's about using the right type of wireless and the right type of equipment to accomplish whatever is the objective. And then there's this.